The level is still on the workbench, right where it's been for 42 years. Brass, scratched, one end chipped where I dropped it in a trench at the Whitmore school job back in '87. I put it down next to the ibuprofen every night before I go in. It's a ritual now, I guess. Set the level down, shake out 2 pills, swallow them with whatever's left in the water glass. Go inside. That's the whole pharmacy now. 200 milligrams of ibuprofen. That's what I get. For 42 years I built things that didn't move. Load-bearing walls. Concrete footings rated for 50-year loads. I had an eye for level that my guys used to joke about. Get Coker in here, he can read a foundation by feel. I wasn't bragging. It was just true. I knew when something was straight. I was 71 years of age before I understood that I'd spent 20 of those years in this same garage counting a completely different kind of pill, and I had never once thought to hold the instrument up to myself. In September of 2001, I was 42 years old and I had a herniated disc at L4-L5. If you've ever worked construction, real construction, not management, not the guy who stands with the clipboard, you know that back injuries aren't a matter of if, they're a matter of when, and what, and how bad. I'd had minor things over the years. A pulled lumbar muscle in '93 that had me flat for 3 days. A knee thing on the Elmhurst job that gave me trouble in cold weather for years after. You tape it, you ice it, you show up Monday morning because there are 15 guys whose paychecks depend on you showing up Monday morning. The L4-L5 was different. We were pouring the gymnasium floor at Jefferson Middle School, a contract I had been working toward for 2 years. The biggest single job Coker and Sons had landed to that point. I was in the trench passing rebar to Carl Mesker, my foreman at the time. Carl, 51, 20 years in the trade, the kind of man who never complained, and so you never knew when something was wrong. I lifted a bundle of rebar that I should not have lifted without a second man, and I felt something in my lower back give way in a manner that I can only describe as structural. Not a tear, a collapse. The pain was immediate and complete. I have been burned by a torch. I have had a nail gun discharged through my palm on a Friday morning in 1999. I have broken my left wrist in 2 places stepping off a concrete form. None of it was like this. This was the pain of a building settling wrong, the groan of weight bearing down on something that was no longer capable of bearing it. Carl drove me to St. Joseph Hospital. I told him not to call Patty until I knew something. Dr. Mark Fenner was the orthopedic surgeon. He was 48, I'd guess, with the kind of measured confidence you want in someone who is about to look at pictures of your spine. He showed me the MRI. L4-L5 herniation, significant, pressing on the sciatic nerve. Microdiscectomy was indicated. Not immediately urgent, but I was not going back to a job site without it. The surgery was October 14, 2001. Dr. Fenner wrote the prescription the same day I was discharged. Percocet, oxycodone acetaminophen, 5/325. 2 tablets every 4 to 6 hours as needed for pain. He said, and I remember this sentence because I have turned it over in my head approximately 10,000 times since. He said, "This is for the acute post-operative period. 2 weeks, maybe 3. We'll reassess." I was not a man who took pills. I want you to understand that. In 42 years, I had never taken anything stronger than Tylenol Extra Strength. I was the man who told his crew to walk off a hangover. I was the man who showed up to the Mason County Library job in the spring of '98 with a walking cast and a crutch because the poor couldn't be delayed. The idea of needing a prescription to function was, to me, a category of weakness that I could not apply to myself. I took the first pill in the hospital parking lot, not because I was in unbearable pain. The surgery had helped with the acute compression. It was more the anticipation, the knowledge that the pain would return when the local anesthetic wore off. I took it in the parking lot with a warm can of ginger ale that Patty had brought in her purse, and within 35 minutes I understood something that I did not have the vocabulary for at the time. The Percocet didn't just stop the pain. It made me feel like the version of myself I had been before the years of hauling concrete started their compound interest on my body. My lower back, which had ached in some persistent ambient way since approximately 1988, was simply quiet. My knee, which always clicked on stairs, silent. The headache I didn't know I'd had for 3 days, gone. I sat in that parking lot with Patty and watched a sparrow land on the hood of our truck, and I felt something that I can only describe as gratitude, deep physical gratitude, that the world had not been taken from me. That's the thing about Percocet that nobody told me. It works. It works perfectly. And it's exactly that, the perfection of it, that is the trap. 2 weeks became 4 weeks. 4 weeks became 4 months. Dr. Fenner extended the prescription at the 6-week follow-up. The healing is progressing normally, he said, but these things take time. Let's keep you comfortable. Another refill. I picked it up at Walgreens on Goshen Road. Linda Marsh at the pharmacy counter. She'd been there 11 years by that point. I knew her by name. She filled it without comment. I was back on the Jefferson site by week 6, wearing a back brace that I hated because it made my crew look at me differently. By week 8, I was back at full capacity, lifting, bending, climbing. By week 10, I was not in any meaningful pain from the L4-L5 injury. The surgery had worked, but I was still taking the Percocet. This is the part I spent years trying to explain to myself in a way that preserved my self-image. The truthful version is this. I took a Percocet on a Thursday morning in December of 2001, not because my back hurt. I took it because I had not taken one since Tuesday, and by Thursday morning I had the kind of low-grade flu that I could not place. Sweating despite not having a fever, a bone-deep restlessness, a muscular irritability that made my hands want to find work. I took the pill, and within 40 minutes the symptoms were gone, and I told myself with complete conviction that this proved my back was still healing, that the pain had been real. It was not the back pain. I know that now. I knew it on some level then, the way you know when a footing is poured wrong even before the form comes off. There's something in the texture of it, something that doesn't sit right. But knowing something on a cellular level and being willing to bring it to the surface and look at it directly are not the same operation. Patty did not know. I want to be specific about this. For 20 years, Patty did not know that the brown plastic bottles in the cabinet above the washer were anything other than a long-term prescription for a chronic back condition. She is not a suspicious woman by nature, and I was, not a man who gave her reason to look closely. I paid the bills. I made it to dinner. I showed up to Kevin's engineering graduation in 2002, and Dale's wedding in 2003, and the birth of both of our grandchildren. I did not stumble. I did not slur. I was not, by any external measure, a man with a problem. The only external measure that told a different story was the calendar. By 2004, Dr. Fenner was writing me prescriptions every 30 days. He was a thorough doctor, Mark Fenner. I don't say that bitterly. I think he was doing what he had been trained to do, in a system that had told him doing it was acceptable. Every appointment I described back pain. Every appointment there was genuine back pain to describe, because after the Percocet dependency was established, the opioid-induced hyperalgesia had made my baseline pain sensitivity higher than it had been before the surgery. The drug that was supposed to help my back was making my back worse, And so the prescription was not dishonest, exactly. The pain was real. But the pain was, to a significant degree, the drug's own creation. I did not know that word, hyperalgesia, until 2021. My doctor, Dr. Arun Patel, used it at the appointment where he told me he would not be writing any more opioid prescriptions. He said, "Dennis, what we're treating at this point is the medication's effect on your pain sensitivity, not the original injury." He was the first physician in 20 years to say that to me. He was 61 years old, and he had been my primary care doctor for 5 years, and he sat across his desk and looked at me with the kind of direct steadiness that I had tried to use on my own crew when a job had gone wrong, and there was no point in not being clear about it. I left his office and drove to a Percocet source I had developed on a job site in Auburn, 40 miles from Fort Wayne, and bought 60 tablets at $15 each. I spent $900 of household money Patty thought was going to a tool repair, because that was the lie I had ready, and drove home and sat in this garage until after she was asleep. That was June of 2021, but I'm getting ahead. Let me tell you about the parallel record keeping, because this is the part I am least proud of. When you run a construction business for 23 years, you develop an instinct for systems, tracking, margin, scheduling material deliveries to the day. I ran Coker & Sons with the same precision. 2 sets of books, in a sense, though I don't mean financial fraud. I mean, I kept careful internal track of everything that touched the Percocet, which pharmacy I'd used last month, when Walgreens would have my new Fenner prescription in the system, which of the 3 pain management clinics I'd registered with after Fenner retired in 2009 had the most flexible protocol. I maintained a physical logbook, small green spiral notebook, same kind I'd used on job sites since the 1980s. In it I noted date of prescription, pills received, daily dosage, remaining count, next appointment. For 19 years I kept this log with the diligence of a man who understood that inventory control was the difference between a job that finished and a job that didn't. The logbooks are in a box in the corner of this garage. I have not thrown them out. I don't know what I'm waiting for. 11 notebooks totaling about 3,000 entries. Every single one of them is a record of a life being managed around an absence, around the space between the last pill and the next one, which was the real structure I was building during those years. Not the schools, not the commercial warehouses. This. I was 42 years old when I started keeping that log. I was 62 when I stopped. Christmas, 2011. Kevin drove down from Indianapolis with his wife Anna and their daughter Olivia, who was 2 months old, the first grandchild. Patty had been preparing since October, the same green bean casserole she made since 1987, the same tablecloth from her mother that we only used at Christmas, the same argument about whether to light the good candles or save them. I had 2 Percocet left. I'd miscalculated. My pain management clinic appointment had been December 17th, and I'd gone through the month's supply faster than I'd planned, which is something I told myself could happen to anyone. I told myself I was not panicking. I was simply being pragmatic. I was managing resources. I sat in the bathroom off the kitchen and I counted the 2 tablets in my palm, and I did the calculation. If I split each one, I had 4 half doses. That was roughly 2 days, maybe 2.5 if I pushed it. The clinic wouldn't be open again until the 27th. My daughter-in-law put Olivia in my arms in the living room. She was 8 weeks old, round and warm and making the small sounds that newborns make, the sort of sounds that should be the simplest thing in the world to be present for. Kevin was standing next to me with his phone out taking pictures, and Patty was crying in the good way, the Christmas way, and Dale was pouring eggnog in the kitchen and singing something off-key. I was counting, not Olivia's fingers, 2 pills, 2.5 days. The clinic reopened the 27th. Kevin has a photograph from that moment. I have seen it many times. My face looks like what a grandfather's face is supposed to look like. Proud, soft, present. I am looking at Olivia with an expression that could be love. I don't know what it was. I was not in the room. That is the moment I use as my marker. Not because it was the worst, but because it was the clearest. The clearest evidence that the parallel record had taken precedence over the actual life. I had calculated through my granddaughter's first Christmas. I had held her and not been there. And I had done it so smoothly, so practiced, that the photograph shows nothing. For 2 years after that Christmas, I sat with that knowledge and did nothing with it. There are things I did that I have no clean explanation for. I fired a man named Roberto Salinas in the fall of 2013. He'd been with me 8 years. Excellent mason, careful worker, the kind of man who cleaned up his station without being asked. I fired him on a Wednesday morning, and the reason I gave, insufficient attention to the Crawford County School Jobs Structural Inspection Checklist, was technically supportable, but was not, if I am being honest, the real reason. The real reason was that I had been in withdrawal for 36 hours, and Roberto had made an entirely reasonable suggestion about the pour schedule, and I had experienced it as insubordination because everything that morning felt like an attack. He found work with a competitor within 2 months. I know because I checked. I have not found a way to reconcile what I did to Roberto Salinas with my self-image as a fair employer. I have thought about contacting him. I have not done it. I don't know that there's a version of that conversation that helps either of us. There are smaller things. A Sunday in March of 2015 when Dale came over with his boys to watch the Colts game, and I spent the second half in the garage not watching it because the clinic had changed my appointment and I was managing a difficult stretch and the noise of the game was more than I could process. Dale knocked on the garage door at halftime and said through the door, "You okay, Dad?" And I said, "Fine, just looking at something." He went back inside. We have never spoken about that afternoon. Patty. In the summer of 2018, she said to me, we were at the kitchen table, evening, nothing dramatic about the moment. She said, "Dennis, something is wrong. I don't know what it is, but you haven't been you for a long time." I said, "I'm tired. The business takes it out of me." She looked at me for a moment the way you look at a foundation when you suspect it's settling but can't find the crack. Then she nodded. She let me have it. She spent 3 more years letting me have it. I think she knew by then. I think she was waiting for me to stop needing the lie more than I needed her. That's what I think happened. I could be wrong. We have talked about it many times since, and she does not blame me. And the absence of blame is sometimes harder to sit with than the thing itself would have been. June 2021. I was 62 years old and my last available source had dried up and Dr. Patel had closed the prescription door. And within 48 hours of running out, I was in the emergency room at Parkview Hospital in Fort Wayne with what they initially thought was a cardiac event. It was not a cardiac event. It was oxycodone withdrawal. Full presentation, elevated blood pressure, racing heart rate, severe diaphoresis, muscle spasms so intense in my legs that I could not put weight on them. The attending physician, Dr. Reyes, Yesenia Reyes, she couldn't have been more than 35, reviewed my medication history and asked me, in a very direct way, how many milligrams of oxycodone I had been taking per day. I told her 20. I think it was 20. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then she said, "Mr. Coker, what you're experiencing is opioid withdrawal. We're going to help you through this. but I want you to understand that you've been physically dependent on opioids for a significant period of time." There was no judgment in her voice. She was stating a fact the way I would tell a client that their building required reinforcement. "Here is the structural issue. Here is what we do about it." I called Patty from the hospital room. It was 2 in the morning. She answered on the second ring, the way she always has. I told her where I was and why. I told her about the Percocet. I told her about the clinics and the pharmacies and the log in the garage. I told her about Christmas 2011 with Olivia. She was quiet for a very long time. Then she said, "I'm on my way." She drove 40 minutes through the middle of the night to sit in a plastic chair next to a hospital bed in the Fort Wayne Emergency Department, and she did not ask me why I had waited 20 years to tell her. She asked me if I was comfortable. She brought the blanket from the back seat of her car, which she had grabbed on the way out of the bedroom without thinking, which is the kind of thing she does. I have been trying to figure out what to do with that for 4 years and 8 months. The withdrawal lasted 10 days in the medical facility, and then approximately 8 more weeks of what I now know was PAWS, post-acute withdrawal syndrome. Sleep that didn't come, or came in 40-minute intervals. A low-grade anxiety that felt like the hum of a fluorescent tube, present even in silence. A sensitivity to pain that was, at first, significantly worse than the original back injury. My L4, L5 hurt more in those 8 weeks than it had since the surgery in October of 2001. That is the hyperalgesia, what Patel had told me about. The opioids had spent 20 years calibrating my nervous system to their presence. Without them, the system had to relearn what pain actually was. This is the thing they don't tell you when they write the prescription, not maliciously in most cases. Dr. Fenner, as far as I can tell, genuinely did not know. The medical education on opioid dependency in 2001, especially for orthopedic cases, was inadequate in ways that have since become obvious to everyone. He gave me a tool that worked. He did not know that the tool, used continuously, would rewire my pain architecture. He moved on to the next patient. I do not hate Mark Fenner. He retired in 2009. I have looked him up once or twice. He's 75. He lives in Carmel. He has no idea that a man named Dennis Coker in Fort Wayne kept a log for 19 years because of a prescription he wrote for 2 weeks in October of 2001. Kevin found out the summer after the hospital. He was 40 years old. He sat at this workbench, right here, standing where that stool is now, and he listened to me explain it. And then he was quiet for a while, and then he said, "How long have you known it was a problem, Dad?" Not accusatory, not theatrical, just the question. Kevin always asks the right question and then gives you the silence to answer it in. I told him about Christmas 2011. He nodded. He didn't say anything else for a minute. Then he said, "Olivia's going to be 12 in September. A fact, just a fact." I said, "I know." He went home that night and things have been, between us, what I would call correct. We talk regularly. He brings the kids over when they're in town. There's a quality of formality to it that wasn't there before, or maybe it was always there, and the pills had been blurring the edges of things so long that I'd forgotten what unblurred felt like. I don't know. Dale found out in 2022. He didn't speak to me for 4 months. Not an angry silence. I've thought about this. It wasn't punishment. I think Dale needed time to recatalog everything he thought had happened and sort out which parts were real. 4 months is not a long time for that kind of work. He came back in the fall and we talked for 3 hours in this garage, and then we went inside and had dinner with Patty and the boys, and that was that. We're okay. We're not what I would have wished for us to be, maybe, but we're okay. I'm 67 now. I've been off oxycodone for 4 years and 8 months. The back pain is real and it's permanent, and it's managed with ibuprofen and twice weekly physical therapy at a clinic on Lima Road. My therapist is a young woman named Becca Hoffner, 26 years old, who has heard me describe the L4, L5 so many times that she could explain it to a medical board. I still sleep 4 to 5 hours a night, which is better than it was during the withdrawal months, when it was sometimes none at all. The insomnia is probably permanent. I've made my peace with it. Twice a week I go to a group at First Presbyterian, men's group specifically for opioid dependency. There are 8 regular attendees. I am the oldest by approximately 15 years. I don't like to talk about feelings in a general way. I never have. But I made a commitment when I started going to show up and stay for the whole meeting and say at least one truthful thing per session. And I have kept that commitment for 54 weeks. The group leader, Marcus Webb, he's 41, former pharmaceutical sales representative, 4 years sober from OxyContin, which is its own irony. He said something at a session a few months back that I've been working with since. He said, "The pill didn't change who you were, it changed what you could see." I think about that a lot. In the context of this work, I've been making furniture these last few years, small pieces, chairs and shelves, nothing structural. I think about it in terms of the level. The instrument was always there. It was always accurate. I just kept it in my pocket. The shelf in the corner, I started it the week of Olivia's 12th birthday. I was going to give it to Kevin as a gift, something made, something that took time. I am 3 months into it now and it's not done yet. I've refinished 2 pieces twice. I'm being careful. I don't know exactly why I'm being careful. That's not quite true. I think I'm being careful because the speed of the last 40 years, the pace at which I move through things, the jobs and the days and the holidays and the grandchildren, had a reason that I can't use anymore. And without that reason, I'm not sure how fast I'm supposed to go. Patty went to bed about an hour ago. The television in the bedroom went off around 9. It's quiet now. That fluorescent tube above the bench has had a slight flicker in it for 8 months. I keep meaning to replace it. The level is on the bench. The ibuprofen is next to it. The glass has about 2 inches of water left. I built 14 schools in this county. I built them level and I built them to last, and I built them so that other people's children could sit in them and learn things that I hadn't. I had a level in my pocket for 31 years. I used it on every pour, every wall, every footing I ever signed off on. I spent 20 years building a perfectly level lie. And the thing about a level lie is that from a distance, it looks exactly like a straight wall.